Okay, so I'll just briefly introduce today's review paper, and I happen to be the guest speaker for the first week, for the second week, because our other guest speakers are having scheduling issues, so we are the first one. So due to the time limitation, I'll just go for the high level.
What time is your appointment?
So the motivation of this paper is that currently the academic studies have identified many audit-related variables that are either associated or are having this causal relationships with audit quality. But given this large amount of knowledge, how can we select certain variables that are the most relevant in terms of predicting audit quality, or more specifically, audit failure? And we believe this is very important because nowadays we see more and more accounting scandals that make people question the role of auditor. So if we know how to forecast those audit failures, we can better prevent it. So we believe that this study can be useful for different stakeholders, including auditors, regulators, researchers, and investors. So so the objective here is to provide this selected list of variables, which we call informative audit quality indicators, or IAQI. So an overview of our research methodology is presented in this diagram. So this methodology is supported by machine learning. Actually, Professor Miklos already mentioned a lot about this predictive or exploratory analysis. So I won't mention more here. So the basic idea is that we go to the literature and collect 31 publicly available audit-related variables. So here you might say, oh, 31 is not a lot. However, we restrict it to the publicly available variables because as researchers, that's what we can have. Then we use those variables to predict audit failure, which is measured by material restatement. And
can I interrupt a second? Abby is saying 31 is not a lot. Abby is thinking modern. This is what she's used to. 31 variables 20 years ago in an analysis was nearly unheard. 31 is a lot.
Yeah, it depends on how you look at it in terms of time. So we use these variables, or we say predictors, to predict the outcome using 5 commonly used machine learning algorithms from the literature. And then throughout this process, we use a machine learning technique called feature subset selection to select the best subset that can predict this outcome.
Abby, sorry to interrupt. I don't get, Abby doesn't get disturbed, so she won't be upset. But you look at that list. You know, I have been writing papers with Logit and Probit, easily 20 years. In my books, there were Logit and Probit there. We didn't call it exactly. Logistic regression wasn't AI. Okay, but now we picked up many of these technologies and called it AI. And it's the way we use it today. Go ahead, Abby.
Yes, exactly. So here you may ask why logistic regression is considered as machine learning. Well, that actually links to what is predictive modeling versus explanatory modeling, or machine learning versus statistical testing. So the main difference is about how you use it, exactly. So the main difference between the two, one of the main differences between the two is that for predictive modeling, we evaluate the performance by whole out of sample evaluation, which means you create a model based on some sample, for example, sample A, and then you evaluate it using a holdout sample or sample B. So that's out of sample evaluation. In comparison, in explanatory analysis, or when you look at all the accounting archival research, when we do regression, we look at R-square, we look at statistical significance. Those are in sample evaluation, which means you build a model based on your sample and then you evaluate using that sample upon which you build the model. So that's one of the main differences. So, but I won't go into the details there. So we use the feature selection to kind of filter the predictive factors that can be useful in predicting audit failure. And we also validate the predict power by using the different machine learning techniques. So this is our main finding. And we also have some other interesting findings that we put in the additional analysis, which is we compare the predictive powers of audit variables versus financial variables. And we found that, oh, actually audit related variables can better predict this material misstatement than financial variables, which leads to some future research to examine, okay, which force is actually driving those material misstatements. Because I believe from your paper readings for this week, you must know that the material misstatement is actually a combination of the material misstatement happen, which is linked to the audit client's internal features and the audit quality. So if this is like based on this finding, it may trigger some future research to look at which is the driving force. And the second, so this is basically our research. And in terms of contribution, we believe that this can benefit different stakeholders by providing them, okay, these are the variables that you can use when you want to predict audit failure. And also our paper sets an example in accounting research that adopts predictive modeling. And also we based on the regulator's call for research, we basically respond to that call to study, to establish this indicator using public source information. And if I have one more minute, I just want to briefly talk about machine learning in accounting research. So, so this is basically a big picture of where the study sits in this domain. So currently, machine learning has been used in 3 ways in accounting research. And the first way is that we use machine learning to directly make predictions. For example, literature has used machine learning to predict fraud, to predict bankruptcy. And recently, Professor Miklos and my colleagues have a paper on predicting accounting estimates. So those belong to using machine learning to make direct predictions. So that's the first usage. The second usage is to use machine learning to generate some variables that can be used in archival research. For example, I believe you already know Feng and Li's paper about using machine learning to analyze the forward-looking statements in financial reports. So that paper actually used machine learning as a tool to generate that variable about forward-looking contents and look at whether that forward-looking contents can impact the future performance of the firm. So this is the second way researchers use machine learning in accounting. And the third way is where our research sits in, which is to use machine learning techniques to identify predictive variables. And we can see from prior literature that some researchers also use machine learning in this way, and our study sits in this domain. So due to the time constraint, I guess we can have a maybe 5-minute discussion section so that we can, like we really value your comments and suggestions. And actually I read all your reviews and I think they are very, very helpful. So first of all, thank you guys. And then we are open to questions. And my co-authors, Professor Su and Professor Miklos are here. So please feel free to ask any questions or suggestions you have.
Hello, it's very interesting paper. So just out of curiosity, so you did like some like the feature subset selection process. So what makes it different? Like whether you do feature selection like subset, and then if you use like the whole the data like and then predict like the directly,
Yes.
what makes it like the huge difference and why you did the feature selection stuff?
So the difference is that if you use all the features, it causes overfitting. So actually, if you look at, let me show you a machine learning textbook. Hold on. Just give me 1 second.
Another thing is the variables which is provided by the PCAOB. Some variables are not available for us. So we want to do perform the machine learning using the available variables for everyone. So that is another one. And then, so if you study economics or statistics, you might already know if we add more variables, we can improve the R skills. However, we do not add all the variables because we want to identify significant variables. So using the feature selection, we want to identify significant variables rather than all the variables, which is listed by PCAOB.
Right. Yeah. So the basic idea is that if you use all the variables, actually the outcome is not the best. So I may need to include the diagram that we created, which shows at certain point when you increase the number of features, actually the predictive power is decreasing rather than increasing. So it's like a saturation point. It's like you only need enough features to generate an ideal outcome instead of adding more to it. So that it's similar to the concept of information overloading or overfitting. So you, at that moment, you need to remove some of the redundant features to have a list that contains the information that is needed.
Yeah, to get rid of like a noise, and it's kind of, I think, like what we do, like the PCA stuff, principal component analysis. Okay, yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, actually PCA is another concept. So the difference between PCA and feature selection is that PCA generates a new feature. So it's like a dimension reduction. But feature selection just select the existing features. So compared to PCA, feature selection has better interpretability, because if you have PCA, you only know that, okay, this is the dimension, but I don't know the meaning of it. So that's also the reason why we choose feature selection rather than feature generation or PCA.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, this data is imbalanced with only 1.69% MAR.
Mm-hmm.
I think it seems like outlier detection. Have you ever think about this?
Yeah, this is outlier detection. So outlier detection basically just means that you want to like find the needles from a haystack, right? You want to identify those abnormal things. And here the abnormal instance is the firm that received this material misstatement. So essentially, this is an outlier detection or a needle in the haystack problem. So that's why in the analysis, we adjust the misclassification cost, which is one common method to address this imbalanced data set. So that's also one reason that when we evaluate the performance, we look at the performance under different misclassification cost levels to see, like, to adjust that data imbalance issue. So yeah, so that's what we did there.
Yeah, when I auditing the meeting by Professor Corgan, and they talk about the partial AUC.
Yeah, that's a very good comment. And to be honest, I need to learn more about the partial AUC because I think it's something new that, at least to me, but I guess Professor Su may provide more insights here about the partial AUC.
Yeah, we are now experts on clustering, and because we are doing that other project, and Professor Kogan has been very involved with it. And you're going to see a whole set of papers on different methods of clustering. And I thought was interesting, Abby, you calling this the needle in the haystack problem. I never really thought it that way. I always thought clustering as being there is a group that is reasonably homogeneous, and this particular piece should be different, but it has a reason, it's part of the group, so this is the outlier. And I think the way you talked it, then I thought needle haystack, yeah, the needle is different. So yes, you're right. And so, well, kind of interesting way to think about that. But you know, outlier detection is extremely, extremely important problem because auditing in general is outlier detection. Auditing is finding things that shouldn't be there and is there. And you know, I have been thinking about these kind of modern technologies in auditing, and I have been thinking that maybe you really shouldn't do outlier detection in entire populations, but what you should do is create subpopulations that are reasonably homogeneous, payments together, receivables together, etc. And then on these, look for outliers. Because the other one might finish up with just too many things mixed up. So it's just a way to think about it.
And to address Yugu's concern, I think we will consider using the partial AUC as an additional test or robustness check to see if the results hold. And actually we perform some sensitivity tests using the F scores to evaluate the performance, and the results still hold. So I think we can add the partial AUC as another additional test.